I remember the exact moment I stopped recognizing myself. It wasn't dramatic. There was no crash, no screaming, no fire. It was a Tuesday. A completely unremarkable Tuesday. I was sitting at the desk I had spent $4,000 on, the one I ordered because some productivity article told me the right workspace would unlock something in me. And I was staring at a list of things I had accomplished that week. A long list, an impressive list. The kind of list a man shows other people when he wants them to understand that he is serious, that he is moving, that he is not wasting his time on this earth. And I felt nothing, not tired, not overwhelmed, nothing. A flat gray interior silence. Like walking into a house you've poured everything into building and realizing slowly that it doesn't feel like home. It never did. You were just too busy hammering nails to notice. I sat there for a long time, the kind of long time that doesn't show up on any calendar. And somewhere in the middle of that silence, a question surfaced from somewhere very deep inside me, a place I hadn't visited in years, maybe ever. The question was quiet. It didn't announce itself. It just rose up the way cold water rises when you've been still too long. Is this it? Not in a desperate way, not in a suicidal way, in the most terrifyingly honest way a man can ask himself anything. Is this the life I built? Is this what all of it was for? The waking at 5, the podcasts on double speed, the tracking of macros, habits, hours, outputs, metrics, results, the optimized morning, the ruthless calendar, the relentless forward motion that looked from the outside like a man who had everything figured out. Is this it? Wait, before you scroll, I need you to stay here for a moment. Because I'm not talking to everyone right now. I'm talking to someone specific. Someone who knows exactly what that silence feels like. Someone who has built something, maybe a career, maybe a reputation, maybe a body, maybe a savings account, and has stood in the middle of it and felt a quiet that frightened them. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the hollow kind. The kind that lives behind the eyes at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and you don't know why. That person. I'm talking to you. And if there's a woman somewhere on the other side of this, a woman who has watched someone she cares about pour himself into everything except the one thing that would actually save him, I'm talking to you too. Stay. I built a life around being impressive. I want you to understand what I mean by that because it's easy to say and hard to really feel. I don't mean I wanted applause. I mean something deeper, something quieter, something installed in me so early that I stopped questioning it the way you stop questioning whether you should breathe. Being impressive was not a strategy. It was a survival mechanism. It was the language I learned to speak before I understood that other languages existed. I built the credentials, I built the income, I built the physique, I built the network, the skill set, the routine, the brand, the output. I built and I built and I built, and every time I finished building one thing, there was a moment, a small window, maybe a day, maybe a weekend, where I thought, now I will feel it. Now the thing I've been chasing will arrive. It never arrived, or rather, it arrived for about 48 hours and then it dissolved, and there was a new mountain in front of me, and a new voice inside me saying, not yet, not enough, build more, go further, you're not there yet, you'll feel it when you get there. I thought the voice was ambition, I thought it was drive, I thought it was what separated the men who mattered from the men who didn't. I wore it like a badge, I talked about it in ways that made other people respect me and secretly envy me. I was productive, I was disciplined, I was relentless. What I was afraid. Here's what I learned. Eventually, after the Tuesday that broke me open, the relentlessness wasn't strength, it was armor. Every goal I chased was another brick in a wall I was building between myself and a feeling so old and so fundamental that I had no name for it anymore. The feeling wasn't complicated, but it required something I didn't know how to do. It required me to stop, to be still, to sit inside myself without immediately reaching for the next project, the next improvement, the next metric that would tell me I was worthy. That word, I thought I was beyond that. I thought the concept of worthiness was something other men wrestled with. Softer men, less driven men, men who hadn't done the work. I had done the work, external work, measurable work. The kind of work that shows up on resumes and in conversations and in the subtle way people's posture changes when they realize what you've built. But there's another kind of work, interior work. The kind that doesn't produce anything you can show anyone. The kind that requires you to sit in a room with yourself and ask questions you'd rather not answer and feel things you'd rather not feel and admit things that make you smaller in all the ways that actually matter. I had not done that work. I had been running from it my entire life and calling the running ambition. Tell me something. When was the last time someone sat with you? Not to fix you, not to advise you, not to motivate you or challenge you or hold you accountable, but just to be with you. When was the last time you were in a room with another person and you weren't performing? You weren't presenting the managed version of yourself, the version that has the answers, the version that handles things, the version that doesn't need anything from anyone. When was the last time you were just a person? I'll wait, because for me, the honest answer was I couldn't remember. And that realization, when it finally landed, was one of the loneliest things I had ever felt. Not because I was alone. I had people around me constantly, a full life by every visible measure. But there's a kind of loneliness that no crowd can touch. A loneliness that lives specifically in the gap between who you are and who you allow people to see. And I had spent years widening that gap, reinforcing its walls, perfecting the presentation on the public side while the private side gathered dust and silence. I was lonely inside my own life. Here's what I learned about where that started. It started early. It always starts early. I don't blame anyone. I want to say that clearly because this isn't a story about who failed me. It's a story about what I absorbed, the way children absorb things, not consciously, not with analysis, but the way water absorbs into stone, slowly, completely, invisibly. What I absorbed was this: love is conditional on performance, not spoken, never spoken, but felt, in the way approval arrived when I succeeded and cooled when I struggled, in the way being good at things earned a certain kind of warmth that being lost or confused did not, in the way the men I respected most were the ones who had things handled, who didn't ask for help, who built and produced and moved forward without complaint. I learned to be that man. I became that man. And I thought becoming him meant I had healed something. What I had actually done was build a prison that looked like a palace. The prison was this: if my love is conditional on performance, then everyone else's love must also be conditional on performance. If I needed to earn warmth as a child, then warmth, by definition, must be earned. Presence must be earned. Safety must be earned. And so I earned and earned and earned, and somewhere underneath all the earning, a boy sat quietly in the dark who had never learned that he could simply be loved. Not for what he produced, not for what he achieved, not for how impressive he was or how disciplined or how much he had figured out, just for existing, just for being there. That concept was so foreign to me that the first time it was offered to me, genuinely offered without transaction, without performance, without expectation, I didn't trust it. I looked for the catch. I waited for the conditions to reveal themselves. I kept waiting for the moment when the warmth would cool, when the approval would be withheld, when I would have to earn my way back into good graces. The moment never came, and that confused me more than the loneliness ever had. Her name doesn't matter. What she gave me does. She wasn't magic. She wasn't the missing piece that completed me. I need to be clear about that because I spent years looking for completion in external things, in achievements, in relationships, in substances, in distractions. And the moment I started looking for it in her, she was the one who stopped me. She said something I have never forgotten. She said it quietly, without drama. In the middle of a conversation, I was trying to steer toward something impressive, toward a story about something I had accomplished, toward the safe territory of what I had built. She just looked at me and said, "You don't have to do that with me." 5 words. I'm not going to pretend they unlocked me instantly because they didn't. I got defensive. I got confused. I probably said something that sounded reasonable but was actually a wall. But those 5 words planted something in me that grew slowly, the way the most important things grow, underground and invisible for a long time before they change the surface. You don't have to do that with me. She didn't want the performance. She wanted me. And the terrifying thing, the thing that kept me awake at night and made me feel more exposed than any failure ever had, was that I wasn't sure me was enough. I wasn't sure I knew who me was outside the performance. I wasn't sure there was anything underneath the building. What if you strip away everything a man has constructed and there is nothing left? What if the construction was not protecting something but covering the absence of something? That was the fear. That was the deep, specific, rarely spoken fear. Look at me for a second. I want to talk about the prison of having it together. It is its own specific kind of trap, and it catches the best men, the driven men, the disciplined men, the men who have worked hardest and sacrificed most and shown up most consistently. It catches them because having it together becomes identity. It becomes the thing that makes you you. And once it becomes identity, any crack in the facade isn't just an inconvenience. It is an existential threat. Because if you are not the man who has it together, then who are you? I had a moment, one of many, but this one specific, where something broke down, not dramatically. A project failed, a relationship dissolved. Something I had been counting on simply didn't happen the way I needed it to happen. Small in the grand scheme, significant in the moment. And I sat with it the way I had learned to sit with all pain, which was to immediately convert it into fuel, to process it strategically, to extract the lesson, apply the correction, and move forward with even more discipline and clarity than before. What I didn't do was feel it. What I didn't do was call someone. What I didn't do was admit that I was hurting, that I was scared, that somewhere beneath the strategic processing was a human being who was simply sad and needed someone to know that. Because asking for help meant confirming the thing I feared most, that I couldn't handle it alone, that I needed something, that I was not in fact as self-sufficient as the identity required. And the identity, the man who has it together, could not survive that confirmation. So I processed alone, and I moved forward alone. And the forward motion looked like resilience. It was loneliness with excellent posture. Here's what I learned about the bricks. Every time I refused to feel something, it became a brick. Every time I turned pain into productivity, a brick. Every time I converted vulnerability into forward momentum before I'd actually sat with the vulnerability, a brick. Every time I let someone admire the performance and withheld the person behind it, a brick, I was building something. I called it strength. I called it my empire. I called it the life I was creating. What I was building was a wall, and the wall was impressive. I want to give it that. From the outside, from a distance, in the right light, the wall looked like something extraordinary. It looked like a monument to human will. People stood in front of it and said words that felt good to hear. They respected the wall. They were moved by the wall. They told me the wall was inspiring. Nobody lived inside the wall with me. Not really, not all the way in, because to let someone all the way in, you have to show them the interior. And the interior, the real one behind the performance, was a place I was afraid of. Not because it was dark, but because it was quiet. And in the quiet, there were questions I hadn't answered yet, feelings I hadn't processed yet. A younger version of me who had never gotten certain things he needed and who was still somewhere waiting. Don't deny it. You know what I'm talking about. Not all of it, maybe not even most of it, but some specific piece of it has landed somewhere in your chest and stayed there. Some sentence I've said has pulled something up from underneath your floor. Maybe it's the performance piece. Maybe it's the conditional love piece. Maybe it's the interior quiet that scares you. Maybe it's just the simple recognition that you have been moving and moving and moving, and the movement has been impressive and genuine and real, and still hasn't led you where you thought it would. Don't explain it away. Don't convert it into a takeaway. Don't immediately reach for the journal to extract a lesson that keeps you from having to actually feel the thing. Just let it be true for one moment. Just let yourself be a person who doesn't have it fully figured out. Inside this moment, in the privacy of this screen. She stayed. When I finally, and it took longer than I'm proud of, longer than the narrative of growth would like me to admit, when I finally started letting the wall down, she stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, not because she didn't see what was underneath. She stayed precisely because she did see what was underneath, and she looked at it without flinching, without performing concern, without making it into a project to fix. She just stayed. And the first time I cried in front of her, really cried, not the controlled kind, not the brief managed release that lets you get back to business. I waited for something to shift in her eyes. I waited for the respect to drain. I waited for her to recalibrate her image of me, to update the file from man who has it together to man who doesn't. She didn't do any of that. She sat with me, not across from me, with me. There's a difference. Across from someone is a position of observation. With someone as a position of accompaniment. She wasn't watching me fall apart. She was present while I fell apart. And the presence, the simple, undramatic, unshowy presence, was the most intimate thing anyone had ever offered me. It was also the most terrifying, because it asked for nothing except that I be real. And being real, actually real, not the curated authenticity that makes you seem relatable while keeping the genuine rawness safely off screen, being real required me to give up the only identity I had reliably held for my entire adult life. The man who has it together, had to set down the idea of himself and just be a man. Here's what I learned about the collapse. The collapse was mercy. I know that's hard to hear if you're in the middle of one. If your life is currently falling apart, if the thing you built is cracking, if the version of yourself you presented to the world is no longer sustainable. I know mercy is not the word you're reaching for. You're reaching for repair. You're reaching for strategy. You're reaching for the fastest possible path back to the image you've worked so hard to maintain. But the collapse was mercy. Because the thing that was collapsing needed to collapse. The empire I had built, the one made of performance and productivity and carefully managed presentation, was not a home. It was a monument. And you cannot live in a monument. You can visit it. You can show it to people. You can point at it and say, I made this, and feel the specific temporary satisfaction of having made something visible. But you cannot lay down in a monument. You cannot be held in a monument. You cannot sit in a monument on a quiet evening and feel in your bones that you are exactly where you should be. The collapse was the foundation presenting its bill. It was the interior reality asserting that the exterior construction had been built on something that wasn't solid. Not because I was fundamentally broken, not because I had failed as a person, but because I had built without first understanding what I was building for. I had optimized without asking what the optimization was in service of. I had moved relentlessly forward without ever stopping to ask forward toward what? Toward what kind of life? Toward what quality of presence? Toward what experience of being alive? The collapse asked those questions by force when I refused to ask them by choice. And then the rebuilding. I want to be honest about what the rebuilding looked like, because it didn't look like a montage. It didn't look like a breakthrough. There was no single morning where I woke up different, where the sunlight hit the window at a particular angle and I understood everything and moved through the world with the quiet confidence of a man who has arrived. The rebuilding looked like Tuesday morning deciding to make coffee slowly instead of impatiently. It looked like a phone call I didn't want to make because making it required admitting I was struggling. It looked like sitting with her and resisting the urge to fill every silence with something impressive. It looked like saying I don't know and not immediately following it with a plan for finding out. It looked like going for a walk without a podcast, without a purpose, without converting the movement into productivity, just walking, just being a body in space, just existing in the world without immediately producing something from the existence. It looked small. It felt enormous, because each of those small choices was a decision to live differently than I had learned to live. Each one was a quiet rebellion against the architecture of performance I had built over decades, and each one, individually, was almost nothing. But accumulated over days, over weeks, over the slow, patient revolution of a life choosing differently, accumulated, they began to feel like something, not an empire, a home. I want to talk about presence, because I think it is the thing I had least of for the longest time while believing I had cultivated something close to it. I thought presence was what happened when you were fully committed to a task, when you were locked in, focused, undistracted. And I was good at that. I could sit with a problem for hours with the kind of focused intensity that other people found remarkable. I could give a project everything I had. I could be, in that sense, fully present to the work. What I couldn't do, or wouldn't do, because I think it was always a choice, even when it felt like incapacity, was be present to a person, specifically, be present to a person without immediately converting the presence into something, without analyzing, without helping, without strategizing about how to be more helpful or more impressive or more emotionally intelligent in my helping. Without turning the moment of connection into a performance of connection. She called it once. She said, "You're with me, but you're also watching yourself be with me." I denied it. Of course I denied it. And then I sat with it for 3 days and understood it completely, and the understanding was humbling in the specific way that only the truth can humble a person. She was right. I was always the narrator of my own experience. Always standing slightly outside the moment, observing my performance of the moment, evaluating how I was coming across, making real-time adjustments to optimize the impression I was leaving. Even in intimacy, even in the moments that were supposed to be purely human and unguarded. The narrator was there, taking notes. Presence required silencing the narrator. Presence required stepping fully into the moment and trusting that the moment didn't need to be managed. That connection didn't need to be optimized. That she didn't need a performance, she just needed me to actually be there. Learning that, not intellectually learning it, but actually doing it, actually arriving, was the work of many months. It is still, if I'm honest, the ongoing work of my life. Look at me for a second. Here is what I want to say to the woman who is somewhere in this, watching someone she cares about build and build and build and wondering when he will let her in. Wondering if the man underneath the construction is someone she can reach. Wondering if her staying means something to him or if he's too far inside the machine of his own making to feel it. He feels it. He might not say it the way you need to hear it. He might express it by building something for you, by solving a problem for you, by being impressively capable in a crisis. He might express it through action rather than words, through presence rather than declaration. He might be so accustomed to showing love through performance that the softer language hasn't been developed yet, but he feels it. Your presence is not wasted. Your staying is not nothing. It is, in fact, the specific kind of love that a man who learned conditional love most needs and least knows how to ask for. The unconditional kind, the staying kind, the kind that doesn't wait for him to earn it. Don't carry him, don't fix him, don't make yourself smaller so he can feel bigger. But if you can stay, if you can offer presence without agenda, honesty without cruelty, safety without performance, you may be giving him something that has the potential to change the entire architecture of who he becomes. Not because you saved him, because you stayed long enough for him to save himself. I built a life around being impressive, and then I built something different. The second thing was smaller. It took up less space. It would not, in a side-by-side comparison, appear to win. It didn't have the same visible ambition, the same exterior momentum, the same metrics that made other people sit up and take notice. It was quieter. It was more interior. It had as its primary foundation not achievement, but honesty. Honesty about what I was afraid of, honesty about what I needed, honesty about the distance between who I performed and who I was. The second thing had room in it, room for another person, room for her, room for mornings without agenda and evenings without optimized output and conversations that wandered into territory that couldn't be measured or monetized or turned into content. The second thing felt, for the first time in my life, like mine, not the mine of ownership, the empire, the possessions, the accomplishments I could point to, the mine of belonging, the feeling that I was not a visitor in my own life, that I was not performing for an audience I had invented, that the people around me, and especially her, the one who stayed, were there not because I had earned them, but because they chose me, the way you choose something real. Here's what I learned about identity. Identity built on performance is always one failure away from dissolution. Because if you are what you achieve, then what you achieve must never stop. The relentlessness isn't passion, it's terror. The engine is not love of the work. It's fear of what happens when the work stops, of who is left when the impressive accomplishments are subtracted from the total. Identity built on authenticity is different. It isn't comfortable, I want to be honest about that. It doesn't come with the same external validation, the same clean metrics, the same easy legibility. It requires a different kind of courage than the ambition requires. The ambition requires you to go further, harder, faster. The authenticity requires you to go deeper. And depth is uncomfortable in a way that distance never is, but identity built on authenticity is yours. It doesn't require maintenance. It doesn't collapse when circumstances change. It doesn't need to be protected from inspection because there is no gap between the interior and the exterior to be protected. You just are who you are. And you trust. This is the leap. This is the part that requires faith without guarantee. You trust that who you are honestly and completely is enough. Enough for the work, enough for the life, enough for her, enough. Don't deny it. There's something you've been withholding, not from the world. You've already decided the world gets the performance, but from yourself. Something you've been avoiding, looking at directly. Something you circle but don't approach. Something that lives in the quiet that comes when you stop filling every moment with productivity and achievement and the noise of progress. You know what it is. You don't have to tell me. You barely have to tell yourself. Just acknowledge that it's there. Just let it exist in the room with you without immediately converting it into a lesson or a strategy or a project for future improvement. It's not going to destroy you. It might be the most important thing you have. I want to tell you about the altar, not a religious one, a personal one. The thing at the center of everything you're building. The thing all the effort is supposedly in service of. Every man builds towards something, even if he can't name it, even if what he's building toward is simply the feeling of being safe, of being enough, of not being afraid anymore. I had an altar. It was invisible to me for years. The altar was the version of myself I thought I was supposed to become, the ideal, the finished product, the man who had completed the optimization process and arrived at the destination where all the work paid off and all the fear was gone and all the questions were answered and all the silence was filled. I was sacrificing everything at that altar. Time, connection, presence, rest, joy, spontaneity, the unplanned afternoon, the conversation that had no purpose, the relationship that required me to be vulnerable rather than impressive. I was sacrificing all of it in service of the version of myself I was becoming. And the version never arrived, because that's not how it works, because the finished product doesn't exist, because the optimization never ends, because the altar asks and asks and asks, and you give and give and give, and one day you are standing in the middle of everything you sacrificed for, and the altar is empty, and so are you. Here's what I learned about the altar. Take it down. Not dramatically. Not as an act of giving up or giving in. As an act of clarity. As an act of finally understanding what you actually want from the finite number of days you have been given on this earth. As a decision to stop building monuments to the version of yourself you're trying to impress and start building a life that can actually hold you. The altar comes down and something more honest goes in its place. Not a monument, a foundation. The foundation is different from the monument. The monument is built to be seen. The foundation is built to hold something real. The foundation is built underground, invisible, slowly, with materials that are not impressive but are solid. The foundation is made of honesty, of presence, of the willingness to be known, of the courage to ask for help, of the choice, made daily, to show up as a human being rather than a performance. You build the foundation in obscurity. You build it in the conversations nobody will quote. You build it in the small moments of choosing presence over productivity, of choosing honesty over impressiveness, of choosing to stay in the room with someone rather than retreating into the noise of your own ambition. And then, slowly, not in a moment, not in a scene, but across the patient revolution of days, something stands on that foundation that can actually be inhabited. That's the home. I thought success would feel like arrival, like finally getting somewhere you've been trying to reach, like the ending of a long journey, like stepping into a room where everything is exactly as it should be. Success felt like motion, like perpetual forward motion on a track I had never designed for myself toward a destination I had inherited rather than chosen. Like running a race where the finish line relocated every time you approached it. The home feels like stillness, not stagnation, not the stillness of a man who has given up or settled or stopped caring. The stillness of a man who has come to rest inside his own life, who has stopped arriving and started inhabiting, who wakes up in the morning, not dreading the quiet but meeting it, who sits across from the woman he loves and doesn't need to fill the space between them with impressive words because the space between them isn't empty. It's full of the specific accumulated weight of showing up honestly over time. Full of the trust that is built not through declarations or grand gestures, but through the ordinary daily choice to be real. Full of the thing that no achievement can build and no performance can manufacture and no optimization can produce. It's full of actually being there. Here's what I learned about love. The kind I learned first, conditional, earned, performance-based, was not love. It was a transaction with warmth as the currency. It was a negotiation, and I am not angry at that. I understand how it came to be. I understand the people who passed it on to me were passing on what they had received, were operating from their own unexamined architecture, were doing the best they knew how with the materials available to them. I am not angry, but I am awake, and being awake means I can choose differently. For myself, yes. But also, and this is the part I care most about, the part that feels most urgent in my chest when I sit with it, for her, she will not receive from me what I received. She will not have to earn her way into warmth. She will not be subject to the cooling of approval when she struggles. She will not look into my eyes and see, behind the warmth, a transaction waiting to be completed. She will just be loved for existing, for being there. For the specific way she makes coffee in the morning, and the specific way she argues with me when I'm being an idiot, and the specific way she stays even when staying is harder than leaving. For the version of herself she is when nobody is watching, the unperformed version, the real version, the one she was probably afraid to show me for a while. That's the one I love, not the performance of her. Wait, before you scroll, I need to say this last thing directly to you. To the one this was always for, the one this signal was designed to reach. If you are the woman this is for, if you are somewhere on the other side of this, and something in you has been quietly nodding, and something in you has recognized not just the words, but the space behind the words, I want you to know something. The man I am describing is not perfect. He is not finished. He is not the completed product of his own transformation, standing on the far shore with his arms open, all his work behind him, nothing left to figure out. He is in the middle of it. He is still learning. He still reaches for the performance sometimes when the presence is terrifying. He still has moments when the old architecture reasserts itself and he builds walls where he should be building doors. He is human in the most honest sense of the word, which means he is capable of extraordinary things, and also capable of the specific small failures that come with being a person who has not yet finished becoming who they are. But he is awake. That is the difference. He is awake to the machinery of his own avoidance. He is awake to the ways he has historically used achievement to escape intimacy. He is awake to the hunger behind the performance, the old hunger, the one that started early, the one that drove him into the relentless building. He is awake to it, and being awake to it means he can choose differently. Not always, not perfectly, but more often than before and with more of himself present in the choosing. He is looking for you, not in the frantic way of a man who needs to be rescued. In the quiet, deliberate way of a man who has built a foundation and is ready to build a home on it. A real one, the kind you can live in, the kind that holds. He is looking for someone who wants to be known, not presented. Someone who is tired of the performance too. Someone who has been waiting in her own way for the specific safety of being with a person who isn't asking her to be anything other than exactly who she is. He is looking for someone willing to do the real work, which is not glamorous and is not a montage and does not produce impressive content. It is the work of two people choosing each other honestly, daily, in the accumulated smallness of ordinary moments. He is looking for you. Tell me something. If this landed, if somewhere in the last few minutes something moved in you, something shifted, something that had been held tight in your chest released slightly, I want you to sit with that, not analyze it, not immediately convert it into an action item or a lesson or a takeaway. Just sit with it. Because that feeling, that specific opening, that small releasing is the beginning of something. It's the foundation recognizing it's ready to be built on. It's the home announcing its possibility. It's you choosing, maybe for the first time, maybe for the 1,000th time, with a new quality of choice, to stop being impressive and start being real. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. I built a life around being impressive, and I lost the thread of myself in the building, and the collapse was mercy, and the emptiness was invitation, and she stayed. And I learned to be still, and still underneath everything I had built and everything I had lost and everything I was slowly, imperfectly, humanly learning to become. I was here. I was here the whole time, waiting to be found, waiting to stop running, waiting, if I'm honest, for exactly this, for you.